The sound of her son's voice, casual and confident, sliced through the calm of the afternoon like a shard of broken glass. Just use Mom's card, Maya. She's got like 80 grand just sitting there. It's just collecting dust in her savings account. Arthur's words, floating from the living room into the kitchen where Margaret stood, made her blood run cold. Her hands, covered in flour from the pie crust she was making for their dinner, stilled completely on the marble countertop. The world seemed to narrow to the doorway between the two rooms, the sounds of the television fading into a dull buzz in her ears. Are you sure, honey? She won't get mad. Maya's voice was sweet, syrupy, a tone Margaret had come to recognize over the last decade as one reserved for careful manipulation and getting exactly what she wanted. Please, my mom won't say a thing, Arthur replied, his voice laced with a dismissive confidence that cut deeper than any anger could. She lives here for free, eats our food, uses our utilities. It's the least she can do. Help us out a little. Besides, she's old now. What does she need all that money saved for? We have expenses. We have a life ahead of us. Each word was a physical blow, a betrayal that stole the air from Margaret's lungs. She leaned heavily against the counter, her heart hammering a frantic, painful rhythm against her ribs. 68 years old. 45 of them spent working, first in a garment factory, then cleaning offices at night, her knees aching, her back a constant chorus of pain, all to build a semblance of security. And this was how her only child, the boy she had raised alone after his father walked out, viewed her life's work, as a convenient slush fund for his wife's whims. The rolling pin felt like a lead weight in her hand. She placed it down carefully, quietly, her movements robotic as she wiped her flour-dusted hands on her apron, her mind racing, her heart breaking. The back door clicked shut, followed by the cheerful jingle of Maya's car keys and the start of her engine. She was gone, off to the mall with Margaret's debit card and the pin her husband had so freely given her. Access to every single dollar Margaret had ever sweat for. I'm off to the shops, Margaret. Need anything? Maya had called out, her voice dripping with a false kindness that made Margaret's stomach turn. It was the same voice she used when company was over, painting a picture of a loving, integrated family. No, dear. Thank you, Margaret had replied, her own voice surprisingly steady, not turning from the sink where she pretended to wash a already clean bowl. She couldn't let Maya see her face, couldn't reveal the devastation that must be written in her eyes. She waited until the sound of the car had completely faded down the street before her shoulders slumped. She walked on unsteady legs to a kitchen chair and sat, looking down at her hands. They were 68-year-old hands, a roadmap of her life. Veins like cords, age spots scattered across the skin, knuckles slightly swollen from a lifetime of labor. These hands had held her son when he was born, had scrubbed other people's toilets, had sewed 1,000 seams, had saved every penny that now sat in that bank account. She remembered the first $10,000. It had taken 3 years of working 6 days a week at the factory, starting before dawn and leaving after dark. She remembered the envelope under her mattress, the feel of adding a few bills each week, the sacrifice of endless meals of rice and beans, of foregoing new clothes, of saying no to any small luxury. That money wasn't just currency. It was pieces of her life, her time, her youth, all converted into numbers on a bank statement. And her son had just handed it over as if it were his birthright. Arthur walked into the kitchen, his eyes glued to his phone. He didn't look at her, didn't see the silent storm raging behind her composed facade. He poured himself a glass of water and leaned against the refrigerator. Is lunch almost ready, Mom? I've got a conference call at 3. His tone was not a request. It was an expectation, a command she had become all too accustomed to. It will be, Margaret replied, her voice tight as she stood and returned to the abandoned pie dough, kneading it with a ferocity that had nothing to do with baking. Hey, Mom, he said, still scrolling. Maya went to the mall. We needed a few things for the house. The casualness of it, the sheer audacity, took her breath away. She didn't answer. The only sound was the thump of dough on the counter. Did you hear what I said? Arthur asked, finally looking up, a flicker of irritation in his eyes. Yes, I heard. she said, still not turning to face him. And? Any problem? The irritation was now a low burn in his voice, as if she were the one being unreasonable. Margaret turned slowly, wiping her hands on her apron, and looked her son directly in the eyes. Those same hazel eyes that had once looked at her with childish adoration now held only impatience. Should I have a problem, Arthur? He shifted uncomfortably under her gaze. No, of course not. It's just some things for the house. Besides, Mom, you live here. It's normal for you to contribute to expenses from time to time. He said it as if it were the most logical thing in the world, as if the $700 from her monthly pension that she handed over to him without fail didn't exist, as if her cooking, cleaning, and laundry services were worthless. I understand, was all she said, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. She turned back to her work, but something inside her had fundamentally shifted. The volcano of resentment and pain that had been simmering for years was now on the verge of eruption. The decision solidified in her mind with a cold, clear certainty. She would not be a passive observer in the theft of her own security. She would not watch Maya fritter away in an afternoon what had taken her a lifetime to build. She finished preparing the lunch, placed it on the table, and without a word, walked straight to her bedroom, the small box-like room that had been a storage pantry before she moved in. She locked the door, her heart pounding, and took out her old flip-style mobile phone. Her fingers, though trembling, dialed the bank's number from memory. She waited through the rings, each one stretching into an eternity. Thank you for calling First National Bank. This is Sarah speaking. How can I help you today? A polite voice answered. I need to block my debit card. Immediately, Margaret said, her voice firm, belying the tremor in her hands. After verifying her identity with a series of security questions, the operator, Sarah, proceeded. I understand, Mrs. Delaney. I am now blocking the card effective immediately. No further transactions will be authorized. Would you like a new card sent to your registered address? No, Margaret said quickly. I will pick it up in person at the Main Street branch next week. Very well. Your card was blocked at 12:42 p.m. Is there anything else I can assist you with? No, that will be all. Thank you. Margaret hung up the phone and sank onto the edge of her narrow bed, the adrenaline leaving her weak. She had done it. She had drawn a line. It took less than 30 minutes. Margaret heard Arthur's phone ring in the living room, his muffled greeting, and then the sudden sharp change in his tone. What do you mean it's blocked? That's impossible. She doesn't even know how to do that. His voice grew louder, more agitated. She could picture his frustrated expression. She stayed perfectly still in her room, holding her breath, a strange sense of calm settling over her. She heard his footsteps approach her door, followed by a sharp rap of knuckles. Mom? Are you in there? I need to talk to you. Now. She waited a beat, then two, before unlocking and opening the door. Arthur stood there, phone in hand, his face a mask of anxious frustration. Mom, Maya just called from the mall. Your card was declined. The bank says it's blocked. Did you do something to it? Margaret looked him in the eye, no longer afraid. Yes, Arthur. I blocked it. His jaw dropped. What? Why would you do that? Maya is at the checkout with a cart full of things. She's being humiliated. I did not give her permission to use my card. That money is mine, she stated, her composure unshakable. Mom, don't start with that. She was just buying things we need for the house. It's not a big deal. Call the bank and unblock it right now, he ordered, his voice rising to a shout. For the first time in 20 years, Margaret looked at her son and said the one word he never expected to hear. No. Arthur fell silent, staring at her as if she'd grown a second head. What do you mean, no? Mom, you're not understanding. Maya is waiting with over $2,000 worth of purchases. Do you have any idea how embarrassed she is? $2,000, Margaret repeated slowly, the figure burning in her mind. Arthur, she was going to spend $2,000 of my money without even asking me. It's for the house. A new coffee table, some kitchenware, things we need. It's not like it's for herself, he exploded, as if that justified the theft. I did not authorize those expenses. I saved that money working for 40 years. It's not family money. It's my money. Mom, you live in this house. You use the electricity, the water, the internet. All of that costs money. It's only fair that you contribute. He shot back, crossing his arms over his chest. I give you my entire pension every month. $700. I cook, I clean, I do the laundry. Isn't that contributing? The question hung in the air, sharp and undeniable. That $700 doesn't even cover your food. Mom, you're being selfish. You have $80,000 saved that you're not using for anything. What do you want it for? What are you going to do with it at your age? The words, at your age, were a deliberate, cruel dagger designed to make her feel obsolete, a burden whose time had passed. Margaret absorbed the blow, straightening her spine. That money is to buy my own apartment, Arthur. So I can stop being a burden to you. She saw the shock register in his eyes, the flicker of understanding that he had gone too far. What are you talking about? Nobody said you're a burden. He backtracked, but his voice lacked conviction. You just did. 5 minutes ago in the living room, you told Maya I lived here for free, that I ate your food, that I was old and didn't need that much money. The silence that followed was thick and uncomfortable. Arthur opened and closed his mouth, unable to form a response. The truth laid bare was indefensible. The confrontation was put on hold by the sound of Maya's car screeching into the driveway, the door slamming with such force the pictures on the wall rattled. Her heels clicked a staccato of fury on the hardwood floor. Where is she? Maya's voice was pure venom, stripped of all its fake sweetness. Maya, calm down. Let's talk about this, Arthur pleaded, his voice weary. Calm down? Your mother just humiliated me in front of a store full of people. I had to leave a full cart and walk out. Where is she? Margaret took a deep breath, unlocked her door and walked out to face the storm. Maya stood in the living room, her face flushed, still holding her empty shopping bags. Margaret, we need to talk. Seriously. Yes, we do, Margaret agreed calmly, taking a seat in her usual armchair. Why did you block your card? Why did you embarrass me like that? Maya attacked immediately. I didn't embarrass you. You embarrassed yourself by trying to spend $2,000 of my money without my permission, Margaret replied, her gaze steady. It's not just your money. This is a family. Families share. Maya shouted, taking an aggressive step forward. I am not your family, Maya. I am Arthur's mother. My money is mine. I earned it. I saved it. And I decide what to do with it. Mom, please, Arthur tried to interject. Maya just wanted to buy things we really need. Then buy them with your own money, Margaret said, her voice like steel. You both work. You have 2 salaries. Why do you need mine? The argument raged, circular and ugly. Accusations of ingratitude were met with facts of financial contribution. Harsh words about her age and loneliness were thrown like grenades. Through it all, Margaret held her ground. A newfound strength born from a lifetime of suppressed dignity finally roaring to life. She was no longer pleading for respect. She was demanding it. That night, after the house had fallen into a tense, hostile silence, Margaret locked her bedroom door and dialed the number of her oldest friend, Beatrice. Margaret? What's wrong? It's late, Beatrice answered, her voice laced with immediate concern. And Margaret broke. She told her everything. The overheard conversation, the blocked card, the vicious fight, the hurtful words, the 20 years of slowly eroding self-worth in a house that was never a home. Beatrice listened, a silent pillar of support on the other end of the line. When Margaret was finally spent, her friend spoke with a firm, no-nonsense clarity. Margaret, listen to me. Tomorrow morning you are packing a bag and you are coming to my house. You will stay with me for as long as you need while you find your own place. You cannot stay there another day. That house is poisoning your soul. Beatrice, I can't impose on you like that. Your apartment is so small. I have a sofa that pulls out into a bed. And it's 1,000 times more comfortable than sleeping in a house where you're not valued. This is not a discussion, Margaret. It's an order. Tomorrow. The relief that washed over Margaret was so profound it brought on a fresh wave of tears. A lifeline had been thrown. For the first time in years she had a way out. Sleep was impossible. Margaret spent the night staring at the ceiling, replaying the last 2 decades. She remembered the day Arthur, newly married to Maya, had convinced her to sell her small, paid-off cottage. "We'll get a bigger house, Mom. You'll live with us. We're family." The $50,000 from the sale of her cottage had become their down payment. The loan he promised to repay was never mentioned again. She had traded her independence for the promise of family, and in return, she had become a live-in servant and a financial reserve. When morning came, she moved with a quiet, determined purpose. She made breakfast as usual but did not stay to serve it. She showered, dressed in her best suit, and began to pack her life into 2 large suitcases. Her modest wardrobe, her photographs, her important documents, and the small wooden box containing her mother's pearls and her own few pieces of jewelry. It was startling how little of her there was in this 4-bedroom house. She waited until she heard both Arthur and Maya leave for work. The silence they left behind was deafening. She walked through the empty rooms one last time. The kitchen where she had cooked thousands of meals, the living room where she was never allowed to sit comfortably, the dining room where she always took the least comfortable chair. She felt no nostalgia, only a profound sense of closure. She left the house keys on the dining table with a handwritten note. "Arthur, I am leaving. I can no longer live in a house where my only value is my money. Thank you for these 20 years, but I need to reclaim my dignity. Don't look for me. When I have my new apartment, I will send you the address. I love you, but I love myself more. Mom." She called a taxi, and when it arrived, she loaded her suitcases into the trunk without a backward glance. Beatrice was waiting for her on the sidewalk outside her apartment building, her arms open wide. The hug she gave Margaret was fierce and long, a silent communication of solidarity and love. "You're here. You're safe now," Beatrice whispered, and Margaret finally felt the iron band of tension around her chest begin to loosen. Beatrice's apartment was indeed small, but it was filled with light, books, and a palpable sense of peace. There was no tension in the air, no unspoken rules, no criticism waiting in the wings. "The sofa is all yours," Beatrice said, showing her where to put her things. "And this is your home for as long as you need it." "Beatrice, I don't know how to thank you." "You thank me by getting your life back," Beatrice said firmly. "Now let's have a cup of tea and make a plan." As they sat at Beatrice's small kitchen table, Margaret's phone began to buzz incessantly. Arthur's name flashed on the screen. She ignored the calls, the texts that shifted from worried to angry to threatening. She turned the phone off, placing it face down on the table. For the first time in 20 years, her own well-being was the priority. Finding a perfect small apartment, the legal process of buying it, facing Arthur's attempted interventions, rebuilding a relationship with him on her own terms, discovering new hobbies and a community, and ultimately finding a profound and hard-won peace in her independence. The story would conclude with Margaret, settled in her own home, content and self-assured, having learned that it is never too late to choose yourself. Sitting in Beatrice's sunlit kitchen, the hum of the city outside was a comforting sound, a world away from the oppressive silence of Arthur's house. Beatrice slid a cup of steaming chamomile tea across the table. "Right," she said, her tone businesslike. "The first thing we do is get you a new bank card and secure your finances. Then we look at apartments." Margaret felt a thrill of both terror and excitement. It had been so long since she had made a decision purely for herself. With Beatrice's laptop open, they began searching for rental listings, but Margaret's eyes kept drifting to the for sale section. A small daring idea began to take root. She wasn't looking for a temporary landing. She was looking for a home, a permanent one that no one could ever make her feel was not hers. The first few apartments were disheartening, dark, cramped, or in buildings that felt neglected. But the fifth one, a top-floor studio in a well-maintained brownstone, felt different the moment she stepped inside. It had a large bay window overlooking a quiet, tree-lined street, gleaming hardwood floors, and a tiny but efficient kitchen. It was for sale. "It's a co-op," The elderly owner, Mr. Gable, explained. Asking price is $75,000. Margaret's heart hammered. It was less than she had. She could pay cash. She walked to the window, imagining her chair there, her books on a shelf, the morning light waking her. "I'll take it," she heard herself say, her voice firm with a certainty that surprised her. Beatrice squeezed her hand, her eyes shining with pride. Beatrice's nephew Robert, a kind-eyed man in his 40s, agreed to act as her real estate lawyer. In his office, he carefully explained the co-op board approval process. "They'll review your finances, Margaret. It's mostly a formality." He looked over her bank statements. "Your financials are impeccable. The board will see a responsible, cash-paying buyer. There should be no issue." He then drew up a power of attorney document, naming Beatrice as her proxy for all matters related to the apartment. "This is just a precaution," he assured her, "in case Arthur tries to interfere before the closing." Signing the papers, Margaret felt a powerful sense of agency. She was building a fortress around her new life, brick by legal brick. While sorting through a box of linens at Beatrice's, Margaret's doorbell rang. Beatrice peered through the peephole and her face hardened. "It's Arthur." Margaret's breath hitched. "Let him in," she said, squaring her shoulders. Arthur looked haggard, his clothes rumpled. "Mom, we need to talk. Please come home. This is ridiculous." He tried to step inside, but Margaret stood firm in the doorway. "I am home, Arthur. For now." He pleaded, he guilt-tripped, he even cried, but Margaret held her ground. When he realized his emotional appeals were failing, his tone shifted. "You're making a huge mistake, Mom. You'll be all alone." Margaret looked at her son, truly looked at him, and saw a stranger. "I'd rather be alone and at peace than accompanied and miserable," she replied, and gently closed the door. Dressed in her best suit, Margaret sat before the three-member co-op board in the building's common room. She answered their questions about her lifestyle, her finances, and her reasons for moving with a calm honesty that seemed to impress them. One woman, a sharp-eyed retiree named Mrs. Davison, asked, "And what do you plan to contribute to our little community here, Mrs. Delaney?" Margaret smiled. "Quiet respect for my neighbors, and if anyone is interested, the best apple pie this side of the Hudson." The board members chuckled. As she left, Robert gave her a thumbs up. "You were perfect. The approval is a mere formality now." With the sale proceeding, Margaret and Beatrice embarked on what Beatrice called Operation Nest Building. They scoured flea markets and thrift stores, not with a sense of deprivation, but with the thrill of the hunt. Margaret found a solid oak desk for $30, a comfortable armchair with good bones for $50, and a set of vintage dishes that reminded her of her mother's. Each purchase felt like a reclamation. She wasn't just buying furniture. She was assembling the physical pieces of her new independent self. Beatrice bought her a beautiful, thick comforter as a housewarming gift. "For cozy nights in your very own home," she said. Arthur tracked her down again, this time outside Robert's office after the final walkthrough of the apartment. "Mom, stop this. You're being selfish. That money is family money," he shouted on the sidewalk, drawing stares from passers-by. Margaret stopped and turned to him, her expression serene. "Arthur, that money is the result of my labor. It is mine. The apartment closes next week. I will be moving in. You can accept that and we can work on a new relationship, or you can continue like this and lose me completely. The choice is yours." She got into Beatrice's waiting car, leaving him standing speechless on the curb. It was the last time he would try to stop her. Sitting at the large mahogany table in the title company's office, Margaret signed her name over and over. Each signature was a key turning in a lock. When the agent handed her the keys, two brass ones on a simple ring, a single tear escaped and rolled down her cheek. It was not a tear of sadness, but of profound, overwhelming victory. She held the keys in her fist, feeling their cool, solid weight. They were more than metal, they were freedom. "Congratulations, Mrs. Delaney," Robert said, shaking her hand. "The apartment is yours." The movers, Beatrice's grandsons who refused payment, had left. Her few pieces of furniture were in place. The boxes were unpacked. Margaret stood in the middle of her new home, the evening light casting long shadows across the floor. The silence was different here. It was peaceful, full of potential. She made a simple dinner of soup and toast, ate it at her small table by the bay window, and then sat in her armchair with a book. For the first time in decades, there was no background hum of anxiety, no fear of a critical comment, no feeling of being in someone else's space. She was home. A week after she moved in, a letter arrived, forwarded by Beatrice. It was from Arthur. The tone was different, subdued, reflective. "Mom," it began, "I've had a lot of time to think. I was wrong. What Maya and I did was a betrayal of your trust. I was so wrapped up in my own life, in keeping the peace, that I failed to see how I was letting you be treated. I'm ashamed. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I hope one day we can talk." Margaret read the letter 3 times. The anger she had clung to began to soften, replaced by a cautious, fragile hope. She waited a few days, letting her feelings settle. Then she wrote a short note in return. "Arthur, I received your letter. Thank you for your words. If you would like to talk, you may come to my apartment for coffee on Saturday at 2 p.m. I will understand if you do not wish to." She included her address. It was an invitation, but on her turf, her terms. She was no longer a guest in someone else's life. She was the host of her own. When Arthur arrived on Saturday, he looked nervous, holding a small peace offering of pastries. He stepped inside and looked around, taking in the cozy, orderly space that was so undeniably her. "It's nice, Mom. Really nice." They sat by the window with their coffee. The conversation stilted at first. He admitted that he and Maya were in marriage counseling. He confessed that he had never realized how controlling his in-laws had been until he saw their behavior mirrored in his own actions. It wasn't a full reconciliation, but it was a start, an honest, painful, and necessary beginning. A new rhythm began to define Margaret's life. Mornings were for coffee and the crossword by her window. Afternoons were for the library, for grocery shopping at her leisure, for visiting Beatrice. She joined a weekly book club at the local community center, surprising herself by actually speaking up during discussions. She started a small container garden on her fire escape, growing herbs and tomatoes. Her life was quiet, but it was full. It was hers. Months into her new peace, Margaret slipped on a wet pavement and sprained her wrist. It was a painful, frightening experience. Her first, panicked instinct was to call Arthur. But she stopped herself. She called Beatrice instead, who took her to the doctor, helped her home, and stocked her fridge with easy-to-eat meals. The incident proved something profound to Margaret. She had built a support system. She was not the lonely, helpless old woman Arthur had predicted she would become. Arthur started visiting every other Sunday. Their relationship was changing, evolving into something more adult and equitable. He saw her in her element, confident, content, and busy. He helped her hang a heavy mirror, and they shared a pizza at her table. He no longer treated her like a dependent. He treated her like his mother. He began to talk about his sessions with the counselor, about his own struggles to break free from the patterns of his marriage. For the first time, he was sharing his vulnerabilities with her, not his demands. Inspired by Margaret, Beatrice decided to take a pottery class, something she'd always wanted to do. "Seeing you start a whole new life at 68 made me realize I've been acting like my life is over at 70, she declared. Their friendship deepened, now fueled by shared adventures and new discoveries, not just shared history. Margaret's act of courage had created a ripple, empowering those around her. Margaret received a formal letter from Arthur's lawyer. He and Maya were divorcing. The letter stated that Maya was making no claim on Margaret's apartment or savings, as they were legally established as separate assets. Reading the letter, Margaret felt a complex mix of sadness for her son's pain and a fierce primal relief. The last potential threat to her hard-won security was gone. The fortress was secure. For her 69th birthday, Margaret hosted a small dinner party. Beatrice was there, along with 2 women from her book club. Arthur came, bearing a thoughtful gift, a beautiful leather-bound journal. "For all the stories you're going to write now," he said. They ate, they laughed, they shared stories. Looking around the table at the faces of people who valued her, Margaret felt a joy so deep it was almost painful. She was not just surviving, she was thriving. A year after moving in, Margaret was sitting in her armchair, watching the snow fall outside her window. Arthur was coming for dinner later. Her home was warm, her heart was full, and her savings, while diminished, were more than sufficient for her simple, happy life. She thought of the desperate woman crying in that kitchen a year ago, and she barely recognized her. She had not just changed her address, she had changed her entire world. Margaret learned that peace was not the absence of conflict, but the presence of a quiet, unshakable certainty in one's own worth. It was the sound of her own kettle whistling in her own kitchen. It was the freedom to say no, and the even greater freedom to say yes to herself. Her life was not extraordinary by the world's standards, but it was perfect by hers. She had her own space, her own money, her own friends, and a mended, healthier relationship with her son. At 69, Margaret Delaney had finally, triumphantly, come home to herself, and she knew with every fiber of her being that it had all been worth it.